Okay, we are live. Okie dokie. I just want to say welcome to everybody that's tuning in. We're going to wait a few minutes for everybody to kind of get caught up and figure out how this thing is working. And then I'll start our annual meeting, which will take a few minutes, and then we'll go right into our program. So stay tuned. All right, it looks like we've got a majority of our participants have already logged in and are watching this webinar. So we're going to start our annual meeting. I'm going to call our meeting to order. We do have to do a little bit of business before we get into the program with the journal and the Jewish theater. So as we work through this challenge of the virtual format, please be patient. We're all learning as we go, and we're going to be, working on making sure that everybody gets a chance to our panel to speak and go through this process. So I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to take a few minutes here to start with a motion to accept the resignation of Bob Kaplan as our board member and treasurer. Bob needed to step down. He's been with us for a number of years and asked to step down. He's got other priorities. So I'm going to make a motion to accept the resignation of Bob Kaplan as board member. Can I have a second by a show of hand? One hand from a board member. Any board member? Okay, thank you. Now I'll move on to a discussion. Does anyone have a discussion in the chat regarding Bob Kaplan's resignation? Okay. Then I will ask for all hands in favor of accepting the resignation. Just show your hands, say hi. Anyone that's a member? Okay. Any opposed? Do I see anybody's hands? Anybody comment on opposing? I don't see any opposed hands. Motion carries. Second will be, I'd like to introduce Barb Wrightson. Barb has been working with us as a volunteer for a number of years and is now working on our oral histories with us. And she has graciously agreed to become a board member and become our secretary, our treasurer. Since her background is accounting, she will be a phenomenal asset to this organization. So I'm going to make a motion to accept Barb Wrightson as a new board member and as the new treasurer. Do I have a second? Unfortunately, I can't see anybody. So I'm going to assume somebody's seconding. Anybody with a chat second? Oh, Myrna has seconded. Thank you, Myrna. And now, sorry for the confusion here. I'm trying to jump between screens. So now, any comments? Use your chat if you have a comment about Barb, or if you have issues or have questions about Barb. I'll give you 10 seconds to hit your chat button and say something about Barb, the discussion period. All right, I don't see anybody in chat making any comments, so we'll vote. All in favor? I'll assume you're all in favor. When I go to any objections, use your chat to object. I see lots of welcome Barb comments. I don't see anybody objecting to Barb. So with that, I'm going to accept it. I'm going to say the motion has carried. Barb is now a board member of JHSUM. So with that, that was all the way. Is there any, yeah, yay. If there's anybody else that has any comments that they'd like to make, anything they'd like to bring up during our official meeting, which we're now under, please fill out your chat quickly and I can answer questions or bring it up to the group. All right, I don't see anybody having anything else to add, so I'm going to adjourn the meeting and I'm going to turn this over to Robin Dorshow, our executive director, to go forward with our show. Thank you, everybody.
Good afternoon. I'm Robin Dorshow, and I'm the director of the Jewish Historical Society of the Upper Midwest. Thank you all for being here today. And please excuse any technical glitches. We are working our way through, and we appreciate your understanding. Our program today features our newly published journal, Setting the Stage, Jewish Theater in the Upper Midwest, from its origin to the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company. Researched and written by two Minneapolitans who grew up together in Michigan, this journal explores Jewish theater that was produced over several decades in synagogues, summer camps, religious schools, and community centers. It also explores the careers of Jewish Minnesotans as they participated in professional theater in Minnesota. Highlighted is the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company, a community treasure, now in its 26th year. We'll hear from the authors, Natalie Maggi and Doris Rubenstein, Minnesota Jewish Theater Company founder, Barbara Brooks, actors Robert Dorfman and Miriam Schwartz, and director and playwright Haley Finn. Before turning to our program, I want to let you know how you can get a copy of the journal. So grab a pen and paper, and the information is now on the screen. Okay, and I hope you will all order a copy. It's a wonderful publication, and we're very excited about it. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end of our program. Please submit any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A function that is at the bottom of, or it should be at the bottom of your screen. Q&A. Please indicate who you would like to answer your question, to whom you're addressing your question. Now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Natalie Maggi, one half of the team behind this wonderful journal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I want to begin by thanking the JHSUM for supporting Doris and I in this effort. It was very generous and a great opportunity that seemed to just fit together quite well. Well, one of the questions we were asked to talk about was, well, what inspired us to do this? Well, like most things, for me, it was an inspiration of, in 2015, how did I not know that there was a Minnesota Jewish Theater Company? I didn't know. Doris brought it to my attention and we attended an event together. I had worked in theater in Minnesota at a granting agency, the state of Minnesota, and we'd given grants to many organizations, and I didn't recall that there was a Minnesota Jewish Theater Company. Well, I also wasn't a participant and very active in the Jewish community here in Minnesota, so maybe it wasn't any surprise other than to me. But my interest in theater actually started under a blanket. Well, the blanket was on a clothesline, and the clothesline was in the backyard, and the backyard was in Detroit, Michigan. And from there, and I didn't realize my interest in theater connected almost like a thread. It went from the backyard blanket to working backstage in high school in Michigan as a builder and production builder. I wasn't in front of the screen, I was behind the scenes. Well, that's who I am. I studied history in college. I loved history, which always fascinated me about where we came from. But then I realized I didn't even know where I came from. I wasn't part of the Jewish community in Michigan. I didn't go to Sunday school. I didn't go to Jewish camp. I didn't go to synagogue. I didn't go to Hebrew school. So that whole part of the Jewish experience wasn't mine, but the backyard was, and my cultural community was. And when I came to Minnesota, I became involved in the arts and going to Jewish theater. So again, in 1996, myself and a group of women, we started putting together our own theater programs, and we'd pick various productions. But again, as I said, it was in 2015 when Doris, my friend from elementary school, invited me to the Jewish theater here in Minnesota. So that's a little bit about how it started. The question was, why didn't I know, and what is all this about? So my interest in history raised that flag for me, and Doris had already initiated some thoughts on this, and we said, well, let's work together. So we worked together, and voila, the journal. So that's a little bit about that. In terms of anecdotes, again, my interest in history, and it's mentioned in the book, was Fort Snelling. The story which fascinated me was we tried to find, well, what's the oldest evidence of Jewish theater in Minnesota, or any theater in Minnesota? Well, there was the reference we found at the archives in a report that was written by Andrew Rappaport, who did a fabulous paper back in the 70s. And we were directed to this little statement talking about the people at Fort Snelling were bored. Well, that's the same thing that prompted me in my neighborhood to put the blanket up in the backyard. We were bored. I didn't go to summer camp. I didn't get to do that stuff, but we made our own theater. So like the people at Fort Snelling, we put together plays. But that was very interesting. I didn't follow that thread too much in the book. But after the book is published and done, I came across yet another name. So this is for someone else. I came across a name of Charles Elft, E-L-F-E-L-T, and maybe someone in our community knows them. But supposedly Charles helped establish St. Paul's first theater. Who knew? So there's always more to discover. That was fun about this. The process we used was interviews. And one of the most delightful interviews, which thank goodness it's going to be on record forever, was my phone call, actually a few phone calls, with Shirley Vitoff. And I know, Shirley, you're out there somewhere. So we want to thank you so much for the insights you gave us and continued with some of our local reporters. So we're so glad you were able to share that story. So that's my interest in the book. We looked at it and we continue to discover new things, but of course that's for other people to pursue. So I think that's about all I have to say. And with that, I see my colleague Doris is ready, and I'll turn it over to Doris. Thank you.
Hello, now you can hear me. Thanks, Nat. Thought I'd start with the story of how I got interested in theater, and Natalie was actually part of this. Back in the 3rd grade in our shared elementary school, Natalie and I sort of shared a role. The school was putting on the Nutcracker at Christmas time. And all through rehearsals, I was the King Mouse until we got to like one rehearsal before the actual production. And the people who were carrying me as a dead weight, because I had been killed in battle with the tin soldiers or the Nutcracker there, they said, she's too heavy. I always was chubby and still am. But Natalie was the littlest girl in the class and she was the easiest one to carry off stage. So Natalie got the role of King Mouse, and I never, ever held it against her, as our friendship today shows. But that really got me started with a love of theater. I was lucky that we lived in Detroit because there was a wonderful classical repertory theater there in Detroit, and we had many school trips to see theater there. And my synagogue youth group, similar to what was going on here with conservative synagogues, liked to put on several plays in Hebrew, and I participated in all of them. Fiddler on the Roof, West Side Story, and Finian's Rainbow, and Ma Mishma Beglackamora. So I really realized that I loved theater and went as often as I could and as often as I could afford it for the rest of my life. When I moved to Minnesota in 1984, Natalie was one of the first people I reconnected with, and but really wasn't aware that she was as much of a theater buff as I was. It's been a lot of years in between our being together as classmates. But I was looking for opportunities to go to more theater. I had been working as a fundraiser for various organizations in town. And another passion of mine is writing. I've always written, even as a little girl, I was writing stories about kids on my block, kids in our school class. Loved to write stories, chronicling things. I wanted to be a journalist when I grew up. So at one point in my life here in the Twin Cities, I knew Mordechai, and still do know Mordechai Spector, the publisher and editor of the American Jewish World. Mordechai, I hope you're in the Zoom meeting here, and asked him if he could use a freelancer to do some freelancing about the arts. And he said, yes. So that's what got me started. I was starting to be paid to write, not a lot, but being paid to write something that I love to do about theater and the arts, the things that I love. So I've been doing that for about 13 years now, and still love doing it, but not a lot of opportunity during this atmosphere. I was sitting in the Jewish Theater Company's auditorium watching a production in about 2015, 2016 or so, and it hit me. I looked at the program and I realized, oh, about 4 or 5 years from now, this is going to be, it's going to be their 25th anniversary. That's a time for people to look back and discover their history. I started working on it independently, not knowing how much work it was going to be, but I knew it was going to be a lot of work because I had written 2 other histories prior to this, but they were very distinct institutions that had archives. So that's made things easy, but to really do this kind of PhD level research was the first time that I ever was challenged to do something like this. My master's thesis, I had to do that one. Anyway, I started writing it, making some interviews with people, etc., and realized this is going to be a project that's way too big for me to handle by myself. And I thought, who could I get to help me? Well, I realized Natalie had worked for the State Arts Board for many years. She's one of the most organized people I know. And I thought, my goodness, Natalie knows who we should be contacting. I proposed to her that she be my partner, and she accepted. and it worked out pretty darn well. It took us about 2 full years to do all of the research and the writing, and I could never thank the archivists at the University of Minnesota enough. They could read our minds as to what we really needed to be exploring in the Jewish archive and in the Performing Arts Archive. So I really have to tip my hat to those people, but they were not the only ones who helped us along the way. Certainly the people at the Jewish Historical Society were tremendous help by helping us to define what we're going to do. So I think we really started writing in earnest about 2018, and we finished it up this summer. And the book is something that I think we can be proud of and that our community can be proud of. That's, I think I've spoken long enough, and I'm going to hand the gavel over to Barbara Brooks.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Doris. And I want to thank the Jewish Historical Society of the Upper Midwest for publishing this book and highlighting the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company. And a very special thank you to Natalie and Doris for dedicating the book to me. I was so incredibly touched and moved by that. I cannot really tell you how much. So thank you so much. When I was growing up in Queens in New York City, I had a lot of exposure to the arts. There was always contemporary or classical music being played on vinyl records and then CDs by my parents, from, you know, orchestral to big bands to musical theater show tunes. And I was taken to art museums. And one of my very special trips was going to Broadway theater, seeing mostly musicals, but also straight plays. And one of the things about the arts is how much it can engage our souls and really penetrate us as human beings. But what differentiates theater from other art forms is the most often spoken word, and how theater therefore provides an opportunity for people to learn as wonderful stories are told and taking us on a journey. When I came to Minnesota, I felt very different as a Jewish individual. I felt like I was an other. And I had this idea that maybe theater could provide an opportunity for people to learn, and it could build community and increase understanding and tolerance. And I didn't really know what I was doing when I founded the theater. I came from an acting background. I had no business experience. I had no management experience. I had no technical experience. But we've really been able to grow to what we are today as a theater company because of so many individuals who helped me learn, institutions, as well as individuals that supported us, and artists that have given so much to the theater to make it what it is today. When my grandmother, who came over from Russia on a boat as a youngster, was celebrating with family at a 100th birthday party, my cousin asked her, "Grandma, how did you get so far?" And she said, "I walked." And I think of that often because, you know, starting and growing the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company, I've sort of just put one foot in front of the other. And here we are now. You know, we've celebrated sort of 25 years because the season was cut off by the COVID pandemic, but here we are in the 26th season producing. And, you know, in addition to all the artists that have made the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company what it is today, and I'm really happy that we have 3 of those artists here at this meeting because they have been so integral to the growth of the theater, and you will meet them very shortly. But in addition to the artists and the institutions and the foundations and the state, I often think that God watches out for this theater. There have been multiple occasions where this has proven true, and I want to share one of those with you. Back in 2003, we were producing The King of the Kosher Grocers by Joe Minjares. And for those of you who don't know this play, it takes place in North Minneapolis, and the setting is a grocery store. And the storyline follows three men who are very close friends. And one is an African-American man, one is a Hispanic or Latino man, and one is a Jewish man. And a week before we opened, we were getting ready to go into the theater and put the set up. And the set designer on Friday said to me, I still have not come up with the door to a freezer case. And as I look back, I'm imagining that in the text, it refers to an actor going and, you know, he says something about getting something out of this freezer case. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have put the kibosh on having a freezer case in the grocery store because of the expense. I mean, our budgets now are small, but back then they were tiny. So on Friday, he calls me and he says, I don't know what to do. I cannot come up with a door for this freezer case. To which I remember saying, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have an answer for you. I think I was just at my wit's end. And so this poor set designer said, okay, you know, I don't know. And he hung up the phone. And the next day he called me and he said, I was driving down my alley and there was the door to a freezer case. So I took it. I know it was put out there for trash. I took it and we have a door for the freezer case. And that is something I will never forget, because I do know that with all the hard work and commitment and talent we have, I still feel like God is watching out for the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Robert Dorfman, who is an actor and a director with the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company, as well as credits that are all around the country.
I bought the first copy. Congratulations to my friend Doris Rubenstein and Natalie Maggi writing this beautiful chronicle of theater, Jewish theater in Minnesota, and how uplifting it is, considering you know, the historical anti-Semitism and the resurgence of it recently, to have a positive, upbeat chronicling of Jewish people in the theater and in community as well. The way you write about how it came out of spiels in synagogue and community centers and made its way into the professional theater. I am a Jewish man. I was born in New York. I've been living in Minnesota for about sort of 10 years. My relationship with the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company is my most important home in this city. Last night, we had the great opportunity to open. Nothing keeps Barbara Brooks from producing theater. So we filmed a play we were supposed to represent on stage, and it premiered last night. Avi Aharoni's one man chronicling of his father's immigrant father from Iran to Israel, and then finally to Minnesota. You can get tickets at the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company. It is not to be missed. It's a glorious performance, and we're getting great feedback, and I think it adds to the tapestry of this book. Asking a Jewish actor to talk about himself is not a bad bet. I'm happy to do it. I lived in New York and LA most of my life, and when I moved here, it was right after I appeared at the Guthrie Theater in The Merchant of Venice playing Shylock, and I decided to move here. I felt my otherness. There was there's a moment in The Merchant of Venice where Shylock at the very end of the play is punished by having to convert out of his Judaism and admit to being a Christian. It's a horrific moment in the play, and it's a horrific moment in the life of a Jewish actor playing that role. And at the Guthrie Theater, we're talking about 1,200 seats. It was a popular production. But when the judge comes down on Shylock and hands down that punishment, there was always a smattering of 40 or 50 audience members who applauded. And having been brought up in New York and living in LA, I never quite experienced that level of otherness that I did in that moment. And that's when I sought to seek out Barbara Brooks in the Minnesota Jewish Theater to find a home or a place where I would feel comfortable, find a family. She's been a great mentor to a lot of actors and artists in the Twin Cities, and she's mentored me as a director, and for that I will be eternally grateful. I've done theater all over America, and I've worked with Jewish artists in the theater. My first Broadway show was written by a Jewish playwright, Andrew Bergman, directed by a Jewish director, Mike Nichols. I've done world premieres of great Jewish playwrights, Tony Kushner. I did his Dybbuk. It's surprising how many Dybbuk's there are in your book. The great late Larry Kramer. I was in the world premiere of The Normal Heart, his chronicle of a Jewish man in the world of AIDS. I did a TV series called Legwork, which starring Margaret Colin as a private investigator, and I was her Jewish accountant sidekick. And I'd get involved in all her capers whenever she needed a man on her arm. But the truth is, whether the character is Jewish or not, when I'm in the play, that character is Jewish, whether it's being expressed by the plot of the play or whether it's just subliminal. And honestly, Doris and Natalie, reading your book, I feel like, you know, all of us here, all of us Jewish artists are just adding our own patch to that tapestry. And I feel very proud to be in your company. At any rate, I've done about a dozen plays at the Guthrie. Besides Shylock, I've played Sigmund Freud in Freud's Last Session, and more recently, Paula Vogel's Indecent, which is the chronicling of Sholem Asch's God of Vengeance. It was an extraordinary experience, an extraordinary group of actors. We all played multiple roles, but the one role in it that was the most meaningful to me was the actor in the play of God of Vengeance, getting the great honor of playing the father to Miss Miriam Schwartz. Being on stage with her 8 times a week is exactly what theater should be. I'm going to turn this over to Miriam, but just tell you that she's on a very short list of the great actors I've ever worked with, Jewish or otherwise. She knows what authenticity is, and she knows what sacrifice is, and she has an amazing skill set. So with all love, I turn it over to Miriam.
Thank you so much, Robert. I miss you. I'm actually coming to this meeting from the West Coast, and actually, I'm going to pass this, hop over me and pass it to Haley Finn, because we're both in a rehearsal process outside of this that we'll need to dash to, but she's directing, and I can come in a little bit late, and maybe she can work on something else. Is that okay, Haley?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Mary.
Okay. Talk to you all in a minute.
Okay, thanks. Terrific. Hi, I'm Haley Finn, and I am a director and a playwright. And first of all, I want to say thank you, Miriam. And I'm sorry that I'm not going to be able to be here the whole time, but we are in rehearsal right now. I want to start by congratulating Doris and Natalie on your book. Congratulations. And I also want to talk similar to Robert. It's great to hear what you had to say, Robert, about just Barbara Brooks and how special she is and how she's really made a home for me here in Minnesota and at the Minnesota Jewish Theater. So thank you, Barbara. And I want to talk a little bit about my story about how I came to the Minnesota Jewish Theater. I am from New York City originally, and I moved to Minnesota almost 15 years ago. And to be honest, it was the first time that I ever felt like I was a minority, because living in New York City, I just knew so many Jewish people, and also so many Jewish people that I worked with, and also people who weren't Jewish, like friends of mine who are African American or Latinx. I always say everybody in New York City is a little bit Jewish. So everyone knows what schlep means. Everyone knows where to find a challah. These are things that people know. And I came to Minnesota and it was quite different. And I was so fortunate I sought out Barbara, and also being a director who was new to town, who had directed considerably in New York City, but was new to the Twin Cities. I was looking for a home, and I invited Barbara to come to the first production I directed, which was Hiding in the Open at the History Theater. And Barbara came, and we had a wonderful conversation, and she was kind enough to invite me to direct the next year at the Minnesota Jewish Theater. And that began a long history of working with her. The first play I directed there was The Gospel According to Jerry. And since then, I've directed Compulsion, The History of Vulnerability, Handle with Care, Rose, Bad Jews, and most recently, Significant Other. And one of the many things I admire about Barbara is that she is committed to producing all new plays. So plays that are either world premieres or regional premieres. And I think that's extremely important to note, because these are stories that are new to our community, and stories that I am so excited about the way that she finds so many different angles to the Jewish experience to share with the community. And that through sharing, it's not only reflecting things that we know about our culture, but also like learning new things. Quite frankly, I've learned a lot through the productions I've seen and directed. And also, what a joy to share that with not just my Jewish friends, but my non-Jewish friends as well, for them to get to understand more about our culture and our history. So I just thank you, Barbara, for all the work that you're doing. A couple of little things I wanted to highlight was, one is I had the pleasure to work with Miriam Schwartz, and that's how we got to know each other. And Barbara, as Robert said, is so generous and loyal to the people that work there, that there's so many people who have created a long history with Barbara. And through that, I've gotten the chance to work with Miriam on a couple of occasions, and since then developed a working relationship with her outside of Minnesota Jewish Theater. I hope Robert will have a chance to work together as well. But that is, really a community of artists that she is creating and fostering. And all of the plays, all of the plays are so different, but one of the things that I find so interesting about the work that she chooses is that they're really strong characters in them, and often that even in very serious themes, there's humor. And I think that is a huge part of being Jewish, quite frankly, is being able to laugh at your experiences, even if they are painful at times. And I so appreciate that. The most recent production I did, Significant Other, was a comedy. And I was just thinking about that today, that it was the last time that I was in a theater, in a live theater space. So it felt very resonant. And she also, the thing that's next up in the horizon for us is that she has commissioned me to write my first children's play. And that is very exciting to me. I had a son 3 years ago, and it's a wonderful way for me to marry my love of my son and being a mother, and also, my love of theater, and thinking about writing a play with him in mind and with other children in mind has been exciting. And it's a play about Hanukkah. So thinking about what Hanukkah means to me and how I want to impart that to children has been very, very powerful. And the piece is going to have songs. So it is also, I think she didn't know that when we first talked about it. And then she said, songs, really? And I said, "Yeah, I don't know. I hear it. It just has to be that way." And Barbara supported the idea. And yeah, so we're excited to move forward with that when we're able to gather in person again. So I think that I'm going to pass it back to Miriam. Thank you for letting me speak, and I'm sorry that I can't stay here longer, and I hope that at some point soon we will all be in a room together.
Thanks, Haley. See you in a minute. I want to echo Haley and Robert in congratulating Doris and Natalie on the book, and talk a little bit about myself and my involvement in the Minnesota Jewish Theater and Jewish theater in general. I'm from Seattle, Washington, but moved to Minneapolis to study at the Guthrie Theater, University of Minnesota BFA Actor Training Program. And at that time, I did not know that there was a Minnesota Jewish Theater. And in fact, I feel like a lot of my training was in being characters very different from myself, and sort of the value that was placed on creating characters that were so different. And so, unlike Robert and Haley, I didn't necessarily seek out the Minnesota Jewish Theater, but man, am I glad that I came into contact with Barbara. And really, I think I grew up in a Jewish household and was bat mitzvahed and felt a strong cultural connection to Judaism, but didn't know how to celebrate it within the context of my life as an actor and performer until I began working with the Minnesota Jewish Theater and learned how powerful it is. It may be powerful to be able to create character very different than oneself, but the opportunity to create character within the worldview and life experience of a Jewish character telling Jewish stories is more powerful than I could have imagined. So I've been so lucky to work with Barbara and the Minnesota Jewish Theater on a number of plays, and I am so lucky that she has been invested enough in me as a performer that she has also let me try my hand at directing. I think that really speaks to the community, as Haley was talking about, the community that Barbara has created with the Minnesota Jewish Theater. I worked with Robert outside of the Minnesota Jewish Theater, but we have created such a wonderful friendship and working relationship. Coming to the Minnesota Jewish Theater after having been in the Guthrie's training program, I think all students there feel that the Guthrie is the place where they'll perform and that will be their artistic home. And I didn't perform at the Guthrie until I was cast in a Jewish role in a very Jewish play. And I'm so glad about that as well. I think I've come to realize that my Judaism is a powerful tool as a performer. And I have gone on after that production of Indecent to do a production of Indecent in Portland, Oregon, where I now live, which is so sad. Because I see Barbara and Robert here and I miss them both so much. And there is no Jewish theater company in Portland, Oregon. And I think that's a huge loss to the community, both the Jewish community and the theatrical community, because as Haley said, the ability to work on new Jewish stories, I think for a long time I thought that that the Jewish roles that were out there were limited to Anne Frank, which is a beautiful play and story. But coming into my college training experience, I was not familiar with the canon of Jewish plays. And I'm so grateful to the Minnesota Jewish Theater for keeping those stories alive and letting me play within them, and showing the real breadth of Jewish experience. I've always felt like my draw towards theater is connected with my my Jewish belief in Tikkun Olam, and I really, which is making the world a better place. And I truly believe that that the Minnesota Jewish Theater, Barbara Brooks in particular, has done that through the stories that they tell. I'm gonna run. Thank you all so, so much. I wish I could stay longer. I'm very appreciative. Thank you.
All right, thank you all so much. And we are going to now move on to the question and answer portion of the program. So I ask that you go to, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a section that says Q&A. And if you would submit your question via Q&A, and please note who your question is, who you'd like to address your question. So the first thing I see, actually, it's in the chat, and it's a comment from Richard and Joan Newmark, who said, "We saw Operation Immigration last night and highly recommend it." So thank you. And a good friend of mine also recommended it, and I plan to see it soon. So thank you for that comment. Let's see, we have a couple of questions. The first question, and I believe this will go to Barbara Brooks. Can you explain what some of the components are that go into making theater uniquely or especially Jewish?
Well, that's a question that is often asked, and there's really no answer. I mean, people will respond very differently. For me, it's really about the story, and does it tell a story that is about Jewish history or culture? And I think that the artists that can bring it to life in the truest way are the ones that I love to see on stage doing that.
Okay, thank you so much, Barbara, and thank you to Jerry Ingber for that question. We have another question in the box. And again, I'm going to direct this to Barbara. How many cities around the country have Jewish theater companies like the Minnesota Jewish Theater?
Well, the Minnesota Jewish Theater is an independent professional theater company. And there are not too many of us around the country. There are more Jewish theaters that are affiliated or under the auspices of JCCs. So some of those are Theater J in Washington, DC. There's a Jewish theater at the JCC in Rochester, New York, Buffalo, New York. There is an independent Jewish women's theater out in LA, and there are a handful of others. But I would say it's just about a handful of independent Jewish theaters.
Okay, thank you again, Barbara. It looks like we do have another question. Marshall Tanik is asking, Barbara, please tell us how you select your plays.
I try and keep abreast of new work that's out there. Sometimes people will recommend a play that they've seen, and we get unsolicited submissions of plays that I have a few people that help me read, and based upon certain variables or elements that I'll read about in a summary, I'll then take it further and spend some time with the script. So it's through unsolicited submissions, having people mention plays, and myself trying to keep abreast of them. But there are some very basic criteria. Knowing our theater space, it has to be a play that will work in there, both for technical capabilities or lack thereof, and the size of the playing area. Our budgets have constraints. But that's pretty much how I get to look at them and then consider them.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna, it looks like Doris has something to say. Doris, do you want to unmute yourself?
Okay, am I unmuted now? Okay. One of the inspirations for me for writing this book, and it sort of relates to some of the previous questions, was how many other Jewish theater companies are there? And that was and I did some research before I approached the Jewish Historical Society to write this book. And just as Barbara said, I was shocked to discover how few independent professional Jewish theater companies there are. And that was one of the things that motivated me and inspired me to start writing the book. What is it about the Twin Cities? Gee, our Jewish community here has grown from like 45,000 in Minnesota to something like 62,000 now over the space of 10 years. Something is drawing people and Jewish people to the Twin Cities to be able to support the arts, to be able to support the Jewish Theater Company. But what was it in our background as individuals and as a community in Minnesota that made this possible to have 25 years of unbroken production? There are other companies that are a bit older than the Jewish Theater Company. In fact, the one from where Natalie and I come, the Jewish Ensemble Theater in Detroit, has a longer history, but they've gone for 3 and 4 years at a time without producing anything for various reasons. And so that's a much larger Jewish community than we have here in Detroit historically. And it really was, for me, one of the big questions that I tried to answer in the book as to why here? What was the background here in Minnesota? Looks like there's a couple other Q&As there.
Can I hop in for a second? And I just want to add something to that. People may not be aware of the fact that a lot of our audience is not Jewish.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, we keep a lot of data when anyone purchases a ticket, whether it be by phone or online. We ask if they wouldn't mind sharing what their religious or cultural background is. And looking at 2 years of data for the last 2 years, and I say 2 because the season we just finished was cut short. So combining that data and averaging it, 49% of our audience who purchased a ticket was Jewish. 51% of that audience was not Jewish. And I think one of the things that has fostered the growth of the theater is the recognition of who our audience it is, and looking for more people that are like those people to engage them and bring them into the MJTC family. And so we know that our audiences are people that want to be entertained, but they also want to learn something. And they say that they do that at the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company through work that is of high artistic standards. And so I think that might be a little bit of information that informs how the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company has been able to continue to grow.
Great, thank you so much. It looks like we have one more comment and a couple more questions. So the most recent comment is bravo to Doris and Natalie for adding an important piece to the artistic history of Minnesota, from James Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay.
All right, and back to questions. Andy Keyboard, oh, and she is saying exactly what I was thinking, to Barbara. How did you choose the Ford Parkway Library in Highland as your home? To many of us, it was our center growing up, and it is wonderful to be comfortable there again. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. So to Barbara.
Well, that might have been another little intervention by God. I lived in, and I still live in, the Mac Groveland area of St. Paul. And when I had this idea to found the theater, I happened to read in the Highland Villager that the rec center or the community center was being redone, and there was going to be a theater in it. So I made some calls and got to see it. And at the time, there were no seats. I think for a couple of years, audiences sat in folding chairs. There were no seats. There was no lighting equipment, no sound equipment. We had to bring it all in. But it was just a building that was opening. At the time, the theater was in its early stages, and the city, let us come in and rent it. And over time, we've developed a very strong relationship with the city, and we have a long-term contract with them.
Thank you. And we have a question here. This is directed to Robert Dorfman from Ruth Berman. Some years back, the Guthrie did a play about the Pope who kidnapped a Jewish child. And watching it, I felt more and more unhappy to be able to boo and hiss. But the play's focus was on the Pope as psychologically complicated and did not allow a melodramatic response. Yet I felt I was missing something by not being allowed it. I wonder if any of you have comments on this.
Well, that's the beauty of live theater. It's what we're missing right now, right? That you can participate in a visceral way, direct way. When I talk about The Merchant of Venice and that smattering of applause about Shylock's punishment, I was disturbed by it, but it was a very important moment in the play, because theater is ostensibly strangers, neighbors, but still strange neighbors sitting in the dark and experiencing something in the community together. And there is a communion that happens between playwright and audience through the actors and designers. But there's also an experience you have of the person to your right and to your left, and in the balcony and in the orchestra. You find out something about your neighbors. And so I am all for hooting and hollering and booing and yaying during a performance. That's sort of the point of it, to put out ideas, a variety of ideas, opposing ideas to the public, and to consider them en group.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robert. And we have a question from Sharon Steinfeld. Sharon is asking, what are the plans for showing Operation Immigration after the short season?
We don't have anything particularly set. I think that once the viewings, the set dates have come and gone, it might be available when we can all gather in the theater again. I think Avi deserves opportunities to perform it, and I hope that he will have that opportunity. Having it on a film also enables us to add performances as the word spreads. I know right now, I don't answer the phone all that much. I mean, there is progress to the growth of the theater. But the other day I took a call from someone in Philadelphia who knew someone in the Twin Cities and told them about it. So they were purchasing. I know that this morning we had some viewers in Israel. So I'm hoping that after our set schedule, is over, we might be adding performances as well.
Great. We're getting another question here. This is from James Perlman. How different was it to direct the enhanced version of Operation Immigration in the form of a movie compared to directing it as a live production at the Fringe Festival?
Well, it's a different genre. Luckily, it was my first time directing a film version of anything. And there is no silver lining to this epidemic and this positive society that we're experiencing right now. But one thing for us was that the best people in town are available to work. So we got a crew, Ryan Melling, the best cinematographer. He does all the video and visual stuff for the Guthrie. as well as Reed Racer, who does the same thing at the Guthrie Sound. I will tell you that when we were setting it up, it's a very complex piece, but because we had done it live, Avi and I had directed the Fringe Festival production of it. We had a great deal of confidence that we can accomplish it and we can get it before camera. So our biggest concern was setting up the filming schedule, the filming shots, and getting it cleanly, a version of it cleanly on video. So it wasn't as difficult as starting from scratch with a piece, but for me, as a new director and a brand new film director, it was an enormous learning experience. But with all directing, the best thing you could do as a director is hire the best people and then allow them that process.
All right, hang on 1 minute. I've got 2 people.
Can't hear you.
Apologize. I hope you can hear me now. First, I'm going to go back to Natalie Maggi, who has a comment, and then I will go over to Doris after that. So go ahead, Natalie.
One thing that I just wanted to comment was an observation. Several of the actors mentioned the feeling of otherness when coming to Minnesota. And I thought it's in this year of 2020 and all that our community has experienced and our world, that theater can bring us together and rather than divide us. In Minnesota, we not only have the Minnesota Jewish Theater, but we have Penumbra Theater, we have Theater Moo, we have Mixed Blood Theater. And I do know that in the details of some of the interviews I did, several of the individuals, Michael Robbins, Jack Ruler, did talk specifically about feeling about otherness and where theater brought a sense of community. And in particular for them, it also sometimes was able to bring forth the Jewish values in the community. David Harris mentioned this as well. So I think it's important to recognize that in Minnesota, there is something special.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm going to go to Doris, and then we have another question in Q&A. So I will come back after Doris.
Thank you. I want to tie a couple things together, things that Robert said in terms of the wealth of talent in all areas of theater and live production here in the Twin Cities. And it reminded me that a connection, that a special connection I have with Haley Finn, who spoke here briefly. When I was looking for a playwright to bring my special story, many people in the Twin Cities know about my pickle experience. I'm a writer, I'm a journalist, but I am not a playwright. And I went to, because of the Jewish theater, I knew Haley and went to Haley and asked her if she could find an appropriate playwright to write the play. And she picked the right one. And what luck we have, what good fortune we have to have the Playwrights Center here in the Twin Cities with people like Jeremy Cohen and Haley Finn deeply involved in it, that has such a rich variety of talent that we can draw on. And these are people at every level of the artistic endeavor, the theatrical endeavor. So I really would like to tip my hat to all the institutions that make the Twin Cities such a rich theater community. And one of the reasons we have the Jewish Theater Company again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to both Natalie and Doris. I am going to go to one more question and then we're going to wrap that up and we're going to go back to Jamie, who has a special surprise for us. Barbara Behrman, hello. And Barbara's asking a question to everyone. What plays would you like to see and or produce if budget wasn't an issue?
I would like to
Yes.
see
Yes, I'd
Sholomash's God of Vengeance.
Robert, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I would like to see Sholomash's God of Vengeance produced in its entirety.
You're mute.
I'm sorry, I did that again. I did see the play at the Guthrie, based on the Shalamash play, and that was truly wonderful. Interesting to see Yiddish on the stage of the Guthrie. Wonderful. So, Barbara, do you have any thoughts to that kind of broad question? Barbara, you're muted.
Yeah, no. It would be just lovely though to come across a play that really had a budget that would blow the roof, but that I knew we could do.
Okay, thank you so much. Anyone else have a response to that? Okay, I think I'm gonna look. That looks like something else might have popped up. No, I think I am going to turn things back over to Jamie. And thank you all again.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to let you know we've been diligently working on some additional videos. For those of you that saw our 35th anniversary video, we had great success and great response to trying to tell the stories of Jewish experience in the Upper Midwest through videos. It's something that lives on well after, a exhibit would have been completed, and so forth. So we are diligently working on additional videos. Dale is here with us. He's been instrumental in creating these phenomenal videos. And we've got a teaser for you. And shortly, we'll be presenting some new videos on various subjects. But I'm going to say thank you all for coming, and please watch this trailer and stay in touch because there is a lot more to come. Please make sure you're updating your membership. We need all the help we can get. We're doing everything we can to produce great product and tell the stories of Jews in the Upper Midwest. It's important to keep our history alive. And thank you all again for coming and joining us. Dale, throw us into our video.
We are setting out to tell the stories from where they came, who they were, where they found themselves, and how they lived. For 180 years, the Jewish story in the Midwest has been unfolding. Some of it familiar, some of it surprising. The names that line the streets of the neighborhood and the places we gathered. The years may have changed the landscape and faded the signs, but we keep the stories and history alive of who we were, what we did, and the lives we lived. Because it's our story, and it happened right here.
Again, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here and stay safe these days.
I'm unmuting myself. I'm the host. Looks like I'm the host of three of us. So all good? Did you hear it? It's hard for me to know if the audio is good. Good. All right, everybody, we'll be in touch in the next short period of time. Good job, Julie.
Thank
Worked
you,
well.
Dale. Thank you.
All right. Have
Bye.
a good day, everybody. Bye.